Let's start with those minerals. I began life as an industrial chemist half a century ago, and if I can't use my expensively taxpayer-funded higher education sometimes, they might come around and ask me for the money back, so here goes. First, a rare earth has nothing to do with being either rare or earthy. The earth part is just an old-fashioned way of saying that the element concerned dissolves in acid. And as for the rare bit, the 17 elements with names like yttrium, ytterbium and scandium are called rare because they're difficult to mine. In fact, they're actually quite common across the globe, just not, as it happens, in Ukraine. If you really want to find rare earths, you'd be better off taking your metal detector to China, Brazil or, Russia. The minerals to which Ukraine can lay claim are still valuable: lithium, titanium, graphite, great for batteries, essential for solar panels, and of course making state-of-the-art bombs. But really, does America really need to go to all this trouble to find stuff much of which it can get on its own soil, or from nearby Brazil, or from the Canadian cousins when they get over being cross with the White House? Not really. But I don't think this deal is just about a commercial transaction at all. I think this is the template for the future of a world dominated by two great powers. It won't be the first time the globe's been carved up this way. 2 centuries ago, Britain and France, under William Pitt and Napoleon Bonaparte, essentially divided the world between them, deciding which country gets a part of Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Americas. And each imperial power would dominate its sphere. What was largely accomplished back then by men with guns is today being achieved with an open checkbook. China's Belt and Road Initiative has spent hundreds of billions buying up small countries in Asia and Africa by building new ports, roads, railways, assets that are essentially owned and controlled by Beijing, along with the governments that benefit from Mr. Xi Jinping's generosity. America does it differently. Its troops are the great commercial enterprises. The country that my family came from, Guyana, will soon become one of the richest small countries in the world due to the discovery of vast oil reserves offshore. But those oil fields are being exploited by mostly American companies. The Guyanese will get rich, but America will be richer, and more importantly, will have gained a rock-solid strategic outpost in South America pretty much forever. That's why Donald Trump can be patient, why he could afford to settle for a deal that doesn't pay back whatever America thinks it's given to Ukraine to defend itself over the past few years. This deal was never about the past, the money spent on the war. This deal is about the future and who owns it. And as far as most of Ukraine is concerned, the deal is pure Trump. To paraphrase an old advertising slogan, in Kyiv, the future for Ukraine may not be bright, but it's certainly orange. This is Trevor Phillips on Times Radio. Let's get more detail on how this minerals deal will actually work in practice. I'm going to talk to Henry Sanderson, the Associate Fellow at RUSI, Royal United Services Institute, who specialises in critical minerals. Good afternoon, Henry.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me on.
Glad you were able to make it. Well, tell us what your insight on the details of the deal is. How's it supposed to work?
So I think that the way the deal's structured is essentially it gives the US a right to potential future revenues from any natural resource deals or licenses in Ukraine, covering the minerals that you talked about so well in your introduction, but also oil and gas. So the US has essentially, first option on the revenues or to even join these projects. But I think for Ukraine, the big win of this deal is perhaps securing future US military assistance and being able to give something back to the US in order to secure that.
Is the essence here actually what Mr. Trump said some months ago in his own inimitable way, which I guess people laughed at, but had some substance, which is that if there are Americans mining stuff on Ukraine soil, Mr. Putin needs to think twice before he starts firing into that territory, because that brings America into the defense not specifically of Ukraine, but of its own people.
Yeah, that's what the US is arguing. But I think for investors to come in, mines take a long time. 18 years on average, I think, is most recent data to develop a mine. So any investor coming in probably will want more of a security guarantee than just themselves being present, right, as a security guarantee. So I think that's the big question over this deal. How do you actually incentivize investors to come in and develop these projects? What else is the US going to bring to the table to make that happen? Can it bring institutions like Development Finance Corporation or US Exim Bank, other institutions to help bring capital to these sites? But that's the big question in my mind is who's going to develop these projects if there isn't really a security guarantee in place? Because mineral markets are volatile and you need a long-term perspective.
Can you think of any precedent for this? Of course, because American corporations of this kind have essentially put themselves into countries. We think of Latin America and the agribusiness there. Can think maybe of some minerals in mineral concessions and so on in Africa. Great corporations like Anglo American and so on. But your point, I think, about the security of it is extremely important. Are there precedents for that sort of arrangement?
So I think the precedents that come to my mind are the Chinese deals that have been done, where China, especially in the 2000s, did a lot of sort of resources for loans deals. And these were big deals, such as one in Democratic Republic of Congo, where China would be given the right to the minerals and the future revenues would pay back the money. So, and Venezuela, that China did that with oil. So I think really the US is taking a page out of China's book. And this is part of this bigger strategic rationale, which is in this Cold War with China you outlined in the introduction. The US wants to secure minerals and prevent, China from benefiting from any peace deal in Ukraine. Because before the war, I think, there was Chinese interest in lithium in Ukraine, but the US is sort of copying China and trying to secure the minerals so that they don't go into China's hands, essentially.
Henry, what about us? What about Europe and the UK? Are we just bystanders here?
Well, I think Europe has and the UK have signed a number of MOUs or agreements with resource-rich countries, but I think this deal shows we're in a new age of, big men and great power deals, and I think MOUs aren't going to cut it anymore. If Europe and the UK are serious about building supply chains, building resilience, developing their own industries, I think we need to step up and also do deals. Otherwise, I don't think MOUs are going to cut it in this environment. And the US has basically helped secure, future offtake rights of minerals being developed. So I think it's hard to see at the moment how Europe can come in and also get a piece of the action. But this deal does leave Ukraine open to join the EU. I think that's an important point. So if that happens, potentially other mineral deals could flow from that. After all, the European market is obviously closer than the US market.
I wonder if I painted a slightly too vivid a picture of a world divided into spheres of influence. And you will no doubt have in your mind the 19th century Gilray cartoon in which Napoleon and William Pitt sit at a table, and there's a globe in front of them, like a piece of beef or ham or something, and the two of them are just slicing it up between them. Is it over the top to say that essentially the United States and China are now eyeing each other, and they are moving cautiously towards creating their spheres of influence in which they rule and the other doesn't interfere?
So I don't think it's over the top. I think there is this scramble of which critical minerals fit in. And the US, you can see from the tariffs, it wants to wall itself off from Chinese supply chains. So that essentially does split the world into, a China supply chain, if you like, and a potential US one being formed. I mean, I think the spheres of influence is more complicated. I think Xi Jinping perhaps would like it if he said, well, look, you give us Asia Pacific, this is our sphere of influence, and you stick to another sphere. But I don't quite know whether the US is willing to do that and what Trump's sort of strategy on that front is. But certainly, in terms of carving up the world, I think China has built these fantastic supply chains. It's invested in minerals in the what was considered the U.S. backyard in South America, all across Africa, and now the U.S. is trying to do the same. So if the U.S. Does succeed, if it does go further, then you could see the world being divided up. But at the moment, US supply chains aren't there. And the big question with Trump is he actually going to be able to reshore manufacturing, which are the industries that need these minerals? Is he going to be able to achieve what he wants? Because unfortunately, at the moment, the world won't be split if China's manufacturing everything for the world, if Chinese supply chains are supplying everything for the world and the green energy transition. So, yeah, we're not there yet, but you could potentially see the world going that way.
Henry, thank you so much for your time. And in fact, we're going to talk to somebody who might be able to answer that question about whether Mr. Trump can see his way to satisfying his backers. But anyway, that was Henry Sanderson, the Associate Fellow at RUSI, an expert in this particular area. Well, the mineral deals has been a huge source of tension between Washington and Kyiv, as we know, after it was derailed in that high-profile Oval Office spat between Trump and Zelensky. The Ukrainians probably think that they've got a win today, but what's not clear is whether Mr. Trump will be happy with the outcome for America. Let's try to find out. Talk to Peter Baker, the chief White House correspondent for the New York Times and the co-author of The Divider, Trump in the White House. Good afternoon, or good morning, Peter.
Hi there, how are you?
Fine, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Now, look, he's got something out of this, but Ukraine will, of course, retain exclusive ownership of its natural resources, whatever that means. How do you think Mr. Trump's going to be feeling about this deal?
Well, look, the important thing in terms of for Ukraine is getting Trump on their side, right? And now they've given Trump a skin in the game. They've given him something that he cares about, which is, of course, money, economics. These are his primary driving motivations when he's involved with foreign affairs. And so there's a motivation then for Trump to get a peace deal, because this minerals deal won't work if there's still fighting going on where they're trying to extract minerals. So now, of course, Trump has a motivation to see if he can't leverage a deal. The question, of course, is whether it's a deal that Ukraine can live with, or whether it's simply so tilted towards Putin and Russia that they have to walk away.
Well, that's a very interesting thing, isn't it? Because this is whatever you might call it, three-dimensional chess, isn't it? That where will Ukraine move, where will Trump move, and of course, where will Putin move? What do you think that Mr. Putin is going to be thinking about this? That it's just another step in the Americans strong-arming Ukraine into a deal that's favourable to Moscow? Or do you think he will be going to his friends, this is a bit of a problem, because Trump now has a material interest in Ukraine remaining independent and part of the Western club?
Yeah, I think one of the things that Putin will take from it is the message you were just talking about, which is, of course, that Trump, unlike every other American president, does see the world in this sort of Manichean spheres of influence, 19th century Yalta kind of way, right? That Trump is all about what's in it for us, America first. He's all about, dividing up the world as he and other big players, as he sees them, like Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, decided to divide up. And that Trump doesn't have any particular commitment to Ukraine outside of whatever financial gain that he gets from this deal. He has no emotional or security or sympathetic attachment to Ukraine in its struggle for its own sovereignty and its struggle for its own independence. Perfectly willing to have Ukraine be a vassal state to Russia if that's what's needed to get a deal. So I think Putin will look at this as a cynical evidence of what Trump is all about.
But does that mean that actually he will detect a change of tone? Scott Bessent said yesterday, or he talked yesterday, about Russia's full-scale invasion, a phrase that has not escaped the lips of the of the president in recent weeks. Are we actually detecting an actual change in the body language towards Putin, maybe a little bit less compliant, a bit more aggressive?
Well, we'll see. I mean, you're right to say there's been a slight shift. Last week, of course, the president, put out on social media, Vladimir, stop about the missile attacks. And then a day or two later, he expressed the revelation, it seemed like to him, that Putin might actually be playing him. But that, I think we ought to be careful about overreading that so far. I mean, 10 years in public life, since he first announced for president of the United States in 2015, the one of the very few consistent things about Trump's public messaging is how much he admires Vladimir Putin and how pro-Russia he is, at least in the context of the American political system. So I wouldn't overread, and think there's some sort of overnight change. But it is possible that he is growing tired of this. It is possible he is seeing that Putin is not, in fact, the peacemaker that Trump, for some reason, seems to think he is, and that, in fact, there may be a harder course ahead to getting a genuine peace deal that would work.
One thing that Mr. Trump has clearly always wanted to avoid is a sort of military entanglement of the Afghanistan kind, or going back further, Iraq and so on. But here, to guarantee this agreement, there has to be some sort of security guarantee. We've been hearing. Do you think that Mr. Trump, A, himself would ever countenance that, and secondly, could he get it past Congress?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, you're right to say that this raises questions about how he would, in fact, enforce a peace deal and, in fact, therefore, be able to do the extraction of minerals that he would like to participate in. Because you would think that that would require some sort of an American security guarantee. He is very reluctant to do anything that seems to put America on the hook. He's very reluctant to use any kind of military force in this kind of regard, and I wouldn't expect to see any kind of American troops certainly involved in this. The real question is there a deal to be had in which any foreign troops are allowed on Ukrainian soil to help guarantee a settlement? For instance, the Brits and the French, of course, have talked about a peacekeeping force of some sort. Trump has been pretty distant from that, let's say, and it seems like the deal that he's put on the table at least could satisfy the Russian desire not to have that as a provision. So we'll see. I think you're right to point out that that's not his bailiwick. The idea of putting U.S. troops in this at all, not what he wants to do.
Peter, thank you so much for your time. That was Peter Baker, Chief White House Correspondent for the New York Times, co-author of The Divider, Trump in the White House.